Speaker, can I thank you for allowing this urgent question and for giving our fishing communities a voice in this chamber today. I wish to ask the Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs if he will make a statement on the progress of negotiations relating to future fisheries management arrangements after the United Kingdom leaves the European Union.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank you for this opportunity to update the House. And can I begin by paying tribute to the hard work of the ministers and especially the civil servants of our country's negotiating team, who this weekend concluded an agreement on the nature and length of the implementation period, which will help us to prepare for life after Brexit. Task Force 50, on behalf of the EU and our own team of dedicated civil servants, secured an agreed text which will now go to the March Council of the European Union, and after that Council at the end of this week, the Prime Minister will update the House on Monday. The House will be aware that there are important legal and technical questions relating to fisheries management, which mean that it occupies a special position in these negotiations. Both the EU and our own negotiators were always clear that specific arrangements would have to be agreed for fisheries. Our proposal to the EU was that during the implementation period, we would sit alongside other coastal states as a third country and equal partner in annual quota negotiations. And in making that case, we did so after full consultation with representatives of the fisheries industry. We pressed hard during negotiations to secure this outcome, and we are disappointed that the EU were not willing to move on this. However, it is the case that thanks to the hard work of our negotiating team, that the text was amended from the original proposal, and the Commission have agreed to amendments to the text which do provide additional reassurance. The revised text clarifies that the UK's share of quotas will not change during the implementation period and that the UK can attend international negotiations. Furthermore, the agreement includes an obligation on both sides to act in good faith throughout the implementation period. Any attempts by the EU to operate in a way which would harm the fishing industry would breach that obligation. And of course, these arrangements will only apply to negotiations in December 2019. We're at the table as a full member state for negotiations in December 2018, and critically, in December 2020, we will be negotiating fishing opportunities as a third country and independent coastal state, deciding who can access our waters and on what terms for the first time in over 40 years. It is important that we use this transition period to ensure that we can negotiate as a third country and independent coastal state in 2020 to maximise the benefits for our coastal communities, to ensure that we can control who accesses our waters, on what terms, and ensure that we manage our marine resources sustainably. And we're already looking at a range of data to support consideration of future fishing opportunities, including the nature of catches and zonal attachment of stocks in the UK exclusive economic zone. There is a significant prize at the end of the implementation period, and it is important that all of us, in every area, accept that the implementation period is a necessary step towards securing that prize. For our coastal communities, it is an opportunity to revive economically. For our marine environment, it is an opportunity to be managed sustainably, and it is critical that all of us, in the interests of the whole nation, keep our eyes on that prize.
Mr. Alistair Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Secretary of State for that answer. The problem he has, of course, is that as recently as 2 weeks ago, the Prime Minister didn't see this as a necessary step at that point. I have to tell him, if he doesn't already know it, that the mood in fishing communities today is one of palpable anger. This is not what they were promised. And the basic question that the Secretary of State has to answer today is this. If they can let us down like this over the deal for a transitional period, how do we know that we will not do it again when it comes to the final deal? When it comes to it, will they trade away access for waters to access for markets or anything else? Mr. Speaker, the House also needs to hear today how this bizarre arrangement is going to work in practice. The EU-Norway Faroes deal in mackerel is due to expire at the end of this year. We had thought it would be rolled over for 12 months. Is that still going to be the case? And what barrier will there be to the EU Commission agreeing another bad deal for our pelagic fleet? With regard to the operation of a discard ban, the Secretary of State should know that British boats have a particular problem with hake as a choke species. That is a problem for our fleet and for nobody else. Does he really expect that the other 27 member countries are going to come up with a solution to something that is a problem only for us and not for them? Mr. Speaker, it is reported that the government's chief whip today, or yesterday rather, told his backbenchers, "It's not like the fishermen are going to vote Labour." If that is true, it betrays a certain attitude, and the Secretary of State should not be complacent. He should not take it for granted in the future that they will be voting Tory either.
Well, I'm very grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman for his very fair and detailed comments. And the first thing I will happily acknowledge is that there is disappointment in fishing communities. I know, as someone whose father was a fish merchant and whose grandparents went to sea to fish, I completely understand how fishing communities feel about the situation at the moment. I share their disappointment. The second thing is that the Right Honourable Gentleman asks about future negotiations and the role that we will play. There is a unique 12-month period leading up to 2019 when, at the end of 2019 in the December Council, the EU will argue on the UK's behalf, but the UK will be there as part of the delegation, consulted in order to ensure that all of the legitimate interests that he raises are fairly represented. It's also the case that he raises the whole question of the discard ban and the question of choked species. The truth is that every single fishing nation is affected by the discard ban and by choked species, and that we operate collectively with our neighbours in order to ensure that we have the correct means of marine conservation, because unless we have a system which involves both choked species and a discard ban, then we can have the overfishing which sadly in the past has led to an unhappy outcome for fishing communities. The final point that I would make is that, of course, no one takes anyone's votes for granted, certainly not the votes of those who work so hard in order to ensure that we have food on our plate. But I would say one thing. The only party in this House actually committed to leaving the common fisheries policy is the Conservative Party. And I should say in fairness also, our colleagues in the Democratic Unionist Party share that position as well. And it's critically important that all of us ensure that leaving the common fisheries policy at the end of 2020 enables us all to ensure for the communities that he represents in Orkney and Shetland, and the communities that all of us have the honour of representing, benefit from the new freedoms that leaving the CFP will bring.